The warning lights flashed red across the bridge of the Times Mugunghwa asterisk. Dae-hyun stared at the massive ship that had just appeared on their screens. It was 10 times larger than their small research vessel, covered in dark armor that seemed to swallow the light from nearby stars. "Unknown vessel approaching fast," Hyun-woo said from the engineering station. His hands moved quickly over the controls, but everyone knew their mining ship had no real weapons. They were scientists, not soldiers. Ji-woo looked up from her biology console, her face pale. "That design matches the reports from the outer colonies. It's Vrax." The name made everyone on the bridge go quiet. The Vrax Empire had conquered nearly 1,000 star systems. Their warriors were famous across the galaxy for never losing a battle. Whole civilizations surrendered the moment Vrax ships appeared in their skies. "Try to hail them," Dae-hyun ordered, keeping his voice steady even though his heart was racing. "Maybe they'll let us go if we explain we're just researchers." The response came quickly. The screen filled with the image of a Vrax commander. He was nearly 8 feet tall, covered in thick red scales, with 4 arms that ended in clawed hands. His eyes were yellow and cold. "Human vessel, you have entered space claimed by the Vrax Empire. Surrender your ship immediately. You will be taken as prisoners. Resistance will result in your destruction." Dae-hyun stood up slowly. "We didn't know this was your territory. Our maps show this as unclaimed space. We're peaceful explorers. We can leave. Right now." And, "Silence," the Vrax commander roared. "You will surrender or die. You have 60 seconds to decide." The screen went dark. Hyun-woo turned in his chair, his expression grim. "Captain, we can't outrun them. Their ship is faster and more powerful. If we try to escape, they'll destroy us before we can even charge the jump drive." "And if we surrender?" Ji-woo asked quietly. "The Vrax don't treat prisoners well," Dae-hyun said. "I've read the reports. Most species they capture are never seen again." The bridge was silent for a moment. Then Hyun-woo spoke up. "We have the mining laser. It's designed to cut through asteroids. But it's not a weapon." Dae-hyun finished. "It would take too long to recharge between shots, and it's not accurate at long range." "Maybe we don't need long range," Hyun-woo said, his eyes lighting up with an idea. "If they board us, they'll expect us to surrender. They won't be ready for a fight inside the ship." Dae-hyun looked around at his small crew. There were only 12 of them on the entire ship. They were engineers, scientists, and technicians. None of them had military training, but looking at their faces, he saw determination instead of fear. "All right," he said, "here's what we're going to do." 20 minutes later, the Vrax warship attached to the Times Mugunghwa Times with a heavy clang that shook the entire vessel. The airlock doors began to cycle open. Dae-hyun watched from his hiding spot in the ceiling maintenance shaft, his hands gripping the modified mining laser that Hyun-woo had quickly converted into a handheld weapon. 10 Vrax warriors entered the ship, their heavy boots making the deck plates ring. Each one stood nearly 8 feet tall, wearing black armor and carrying weapons that glowed with deadly energy. They moved with confidence, the way soldiers do when they expect no resistance. "Spread out," their leader commanded. "Find the humans and bind them. The commander wants them alive for questioning." The Vrax warriors split up, moving through the corridors of the research ship. They didn't notice the subtle changes Dae-hyun's crew had made. The doors that had been reprogrammed to lock behind them, the atmosphere vents that Ji-woo had modified to release sleeping gas in specific sections. The first Vrax warrior fell when he entered the engine room. Hyun-woo had been waiting in the shadows, and the mining laser beam caught the warrior in the chest. The Vrax screamed and collapsed, his armor smoking from the intense heat. Alarms began blaring on the Vrax ship. The remaining warriors realized too late that they had walked into a trap. Doors sealed shut, cutting them off from each other. Gas flooded the corridors, making them dizzy and confused. Dae-hyun dropped from the ceiling behind 2 warriors who were trying to force open a locked door. He fired the laser twice, the beam cutting through their armor like paper. He didn't enjoy fighting, but he would do whatever it took to protect his crew. In the medical bay, Ji-woo sealed herself inside the emergency quarantine room. 3 Vrax warriors surrounded the transparent door, shouting at her to come out. She smiled grimly and pressed a button on her console, the entire medical bay filled with a chemical fog she had created from medical supplies. It wasn't deadly to the Vrax, but it would make them very sick. One by one, the boarding party fell. Some were knocked unconscious by the gas. Others were struck down by the modified mining equipment Daehyun's crew used as improvised weapons. The Vrax had expected scared prisoners, not fighters who used their own ship as a weapon against them. On the Vrax warship, the commander watched in disbelief as his elite warriors were defeated by a handful of humans on a mining vessel. His tactical officer turned to him, confusion clear in his expression. "Commander, should we send more troops?" The commander's claws dug into his command chair. This wasn't supposed to happen. The Vrax Crimson Talons never lost boarding actions. These humans were supposed to be weak, easy prey. "Detach from their vessel," he ordered finally. "Prepare weapons to destroy them from range." But Hyun-woo had one more surprise ready. As the Vrax ship began to pull away, he activated the mining laser at full power, targeting the docking tube that connected the two vessels. The beam burned through the metal, causing a chain reaction that damaged the Vrax ship's outer hull. Warning lights flashed on the Vrax bridge. The docking bay was venting atmosphere. The commander made a quick decision. He could stay and destroy this human ship, but it would cost him time to repair the damage. And the humans had already proven they were more dangerous than expected. "Retreat," he ordered, the word bitter in his mouth. Daehyun watched from the bridge as the massive Vrax warship turned and jumped away into deep space. His crew gathered around him, exhausted but alive. Ji-woo was treating minor injuries. Hyun-woo was already starting repairs on the overheated mining laser. "Did we just make the Vrax Empire retreat?" one of the crew members asked, her voice filled with disbelief. "I think we did," Daehyun said quietly. He looked at the stars outside the viewport, wondering what they had just started. The Vrax had ruled through fear for centuries. They had never retreated from a weaker opponent before. Somewhere in the galaxy, the Vrax commander would report this incident, and the Vrax Empire would have to decide what to do about the humans who had refused to surrender. Daehyun had a feeling this was only the beginning. "Set course for Earth," he said. "Command needs to know what happened here. They need to prepare." "Prepare for what?" Ji-woo asked. Daehyun looked at his crew, these scientists and engineers who had fought like warriors when they had no other choice. "For war," he said simply. "The Vrax won't forget this. They'll come back. And next time, they'll bring everything they have. Thanks for watching." End quote. The Times Mugunghwa Times turned toward home, carrying news that would change everything. Humanity had just won its first victory against the most feared warriors in the galaxy. But victories often came with a price, and that price was usually measured in blood. The word spread quickly through the underground networks that connected the galaxy's civilizations. In bars on frontier worlds, in slave markets on conquered planets, in the dark spaces where the oppressed gathered, they whispered the news. The Vrax had been beaten by humans. The undefeated Legion had met their match. 6 months had passed since the incident with the Times Mugunghwa *. In that time, Earth had changed completely. Cities that once competed with each other now worked together. Nations that had been enemies for generations signed peace treaties and combined their militaries. Humanity knew what was coming. Admiral Taesung stood on the bridge of the Times Hansong *, Earth's largest carrier ship. Around him floated a holographic display showing the defensive fleet humanity had built in just half a year. 78 ships, ranging from small fighters to massive carriers like his own. It wasn't much compared to the Vrax Empire's thousands of warships, but it was all they had. "Admiral, we're detecting jump signatures at the edge of the solar system," Hai-One reported from the tactical station. Her fingers moved across her console, bringing up the data. Multiple contacts, very large. Taesung felt his stomach tighten. This was it. 6 months of preparation, and now they would see if it was enough. "How many?" "Counting now, sir." Hai-One's face went pale. 200 ships. Maybe more. They're still jumping in. 200 Vrax warships against Earth's 78 hastily built vessels. The mathematics were simple and brutal. But Taesung had not spent 6 months preparing to surrender now. Send the signal to all fleet units, he ordered. Battle stations. Form up in defensive pattern Delta 7 and broadcast the message we prepared. On every Vrax ship in the system, the same message played. It was simple and direct. This is Earth Defense Command. You have entered our home system without permission. Turn back now, or face the consequences. On the Vrax flagship, Battle Marshal Kryn laughed when he heard the message. He was an old warrior, scarred from 100 battles across 50 years. Never once had he been defeated. Never once had an enemy species actually thought they could fight back. These humans are brave fools, he said to his officers. We will crush them quickly and take their planet. Prepare the attack formation. We advance in 1 hour. But Kryn did not know humans the way he thought he did. He knew them from reports, from data collected by scouts. He knew they were young as a spacefaring species, that their technology was less advanced, that their ships were weaker. What he didn't know was how humans thought about war. The Vrax fought with honor. They announced their attacks. They followed ancient patterns of battle that had been refined over thousands of years. They believed in facing enemies directly, in overwhelming force, in the glory of combat. Humans had spent their entire history fighting each other. They had developed 10,000 different ways to kill, to trick, to trap, and to win against impossible odds. And most importantly, humans didn't care about honor when their survival was at stake. They're advancing in standard formation, Hae-won reported, studying her screens. Just like the simulations predicted. They're moving slow, keeping their heavy ships in front, lighter vessels behind. Good, Taesung said. They're doing exactly what we expected. All ships, begin retreat pattern Alpha. Make it look panicked. The Earth fleet suddenly broke formation and began racing away from the approaching Vrax armada. Ships scattered in different directions, their movements chaotic and desperate. From the Vrax perspective, it looked like the humans were running in fear. Pathetic, Kryn muttered. They run before we even fire a shot. All ships. Pursue. Don't let them escape. The Vrax fleet accelerated, their formations breaking apart as faster ships pulled ahead, eager to catch the fleeing humans. It was exactly what Taesung wanted. Now, he ordered quietly. From behind the moon, 30 automated defense platforms activated. They had been hidden there for months. Cold and dark, invisible to Vrax sensors. Now they lit up with targeting systems and launched missiles in waves. Hundreds of missiles, all aimed at the Vrax ships that had broken formation to chase the humans. Kryn's tactical officer shouted a warning, but it was too late. The missiles struck the forward Vrax ships, explosions blooming across their hulls. Several smaller vessels were destroyed immediately. Larger ships survived but were damaged, their shields dropping. It's a trap, someone yelled on the Vrax flagship. All ships, return to defensive formation, Kryn ordered, his claws gripping his command chair. These humans were cleverer than he expected, but it didn't matter. He still had overwhelming numbers. The human fleet stopped retreating and turned around. Now they advanced, their weapons firing. But they didn't target the strong Vrax ships in the center. Instead, they focused on the damaged vessels, the ones that had been hit by the missile strike. They're targeting our wounded, Kryn's tactical officer observed with surprise. Dishonorable, Kryn growled. But effective, he had to admit. The humans were picking off the weakest ships first. Evening the numbers, the battle raged for hours. The Vrax had superior weapons and stronger shields, but the humans were unpredictable. They used asteroids as cover. They pretended to retreat, then ambushed pursuers. They sent out fake distress signals to lure Vrax ships into traps. In the carrier times Hansong *, young Mi worked frantically at her station. She was the fleet's top cyber warfare specialist, and she had been studying captured Vrax technology for months. Now she was trying something that would either win the battle or get her killed. Admiral, I think I found a way into their command network, she said, her voice shaking with excitement and fear. The Vraks use a central communication system. If I can hack into it, I might be able to disrupt their coordination. Can you do more than disrupt? Taesung asked. Young Mi bit her lip. Maybe. Their security is tough, but it's old. They haven't updated it in centuries because nobody has ever tried to hack them before. Give me 20 minutes. You have 10, Taesung said. After that, they'll break through our lines. Young Mi's fingers flew across her keyboard, lines of code scrolling across multiple screens. The Vraks network was like a fortress. But every fortress had a weak point. She probed the defenses, looking for any crack, any vulnerability. There. A legacy system they used for targeting coordination. It was old code, probably unchanged for 1,000 years. Young Mi smiled grimly and began her attack. On the Vraks flagship, warning lights suddenly blazed across every console. Sir, we're experiencing a network intrusion, the tactical officer reported. Someone is inside our systems. Impossible, Kryn said. Our networks are impenetrable. No species has the technology to. He stopped talking as his main screen flickered and changed. Instead of showing the battle, it now displayed a human face. Young Mi stared at him through the camera, her expression determined. Hello, Battle Marshal, she said in heavily accented but understandable Vraks language. Surprise. Then the Vraks dreadnought's weapons turned inward and began firing on its own fleet. Chaos erupted across the Vraks formation. Ships scattered as their own flagship attacked them. Kryn shouted orders, but his weapons officer had lost control of the systems. Young Mi had taken over completely. Disable the human hacker, Kryn roared. Cut all network connections. We're trying, sir, but she's locked us out of our own systems. We need to do a complete shutdown. And that will take. A missile from the compromised flagship struck a nearby cruiser, breaking it in half. Another volley destroyed a carrier that had been launching fighters. The Vraks fleet was tearing itself apart. Young Mi held control for 3 minutes before the Vraks finally managed to shut down their entire network and cut her out. But 3 minutes was enough. 10 Vrak ships were destroyed by their own weapons. 20 more were damaged from collisions and friendly fire. Kryn stared at the damage display, his mind struggling to accept what had just happened. A single human had done more damage to his fleet than the entire Earth Defense Force. This was impossible. This was unthinkable. This was retreat, he said quietly. Sir? His tactical officer asked in disbelief. Retreat, Kryn roared. All ships, calculate jump coordinates. We withdraw to regroup. The Vraks fleet, battered and confused, began jumping away from Earth's system. They left behind the wreckage of 37 ships and took with them the knowledge that they had been beaten by an inferior force. On the Times Hansong asterisk, the crew erupted in cheers. They had won. Against impossible odds, they had defeated the Vraks Empire. But Taesung did not cheer. He looked at the casualty reports on his screen. 15 Earth ships destroyed. 3,000 crew members dead. And this had only been a single Vraks fleet, sent to test humanity's defenses. Hey one, send a message to Earth Command, he said quietly. Tell them we won the battle. Then tell them to prepare for war. The Vraks won't accept this defeat. They'll be back, and next time they'll bring their full strength. Hey one nodded, her celebration fading as she understood what the Admiral meant. They had won today. But the real war was just beginning. Young Mi looked at her screens, which still showed fragments of Vraks code she had captured during her hack. She had learned something important today. The Vraks were powerful, but they were also predictable. They had fought the same way for so long that they couldn't adapt to new tactics. Humans, on the other hand, had adapted or died throughout their entire history. That would be their advantage in the war to come. Across the galaxy, the news spread even faster this time. The Vraks Empire had sent 200 ships to Earth and had been forced to retreat. The most feared warriors in the galaxy had lost again, and this time, they had lost badly. In the throne room of the Vraks homeworld, Imperator Thrak Nor received the report from Battle Marshal Kryn. He listened in silence, as Kryn described the human tactics, the trap, the cyber attack, the retreat. When Kryn finished, Thraknor spoke one word: unacceptable. The Imperator stood and walked to a massive window that overlooked his capital city. For 3,000 years, the Vrax had been the dominant military power in the galaxy. They had never been defeated, never been challenged, never been forced to question their superiority. Until now. Summon the War Council, Thraknor commanded. Contact our allies, the Kuresh Swarm and the Velthor Collective. It is time to end the human question permanently. The conference room deep beneath Geneva was filled with representatives from every major nation on Earth. Holograms showed real-time data from deep space observation posts. The news was worse than anyone had hoped. 3 species, General Taesung said, pointing at the display. The Vrax Empire, the Kuresh Swarm, and the Velthor Collective. Together they control more than 1,000 star systems. Intelligence suggests they're gathering a combined fleet. A representative from the Asian coalition leaned forward. How many ships are we talking about? How many ships are we talking about? Current estimates are around 3,000. Taesung answered. The room erupted in worried whispers. But it could be more. We won't know until they arrive. In a laboratory bunker in Seoul, Su-jin hadn't slept in 3 days. Around her were pieces of captured Vrax technology, scattered across multiple workstations. She was humanity's leading expert on alien engineering. And right now, the fate of Earth might depend on what she could learn from these fragments. The Vrax power systems are incredible, she muttered to her assistant, examining a piece of reactor core under a microscope. They generate 10 times more energy than our best reactors. But the design is so old. They haven't innovated in centuries. Can we copy it? Her assistant asked. Copy it? Maybe in 5 years with unlimited resources. But adapt the principles to our own technology? That I can do in weeks. Su-jin smiled tiredly. The Vrax were so confident in their superiority that they never bothered improving their basic designs. That's their weakness. High above Earth's atmosphere, Bo-Ra sat in the cockpit of an experimental mech unit. It was a hybrid design, combining human engineering with concepts stolen from Vrax power armor. The machine was 10 meters tall, bristling with weapons, and it responded to her thoughts through a neural interface. How does it feel? The engineer's voice crackled in her headset. Like I'm wearing a building, Bo-Ra replied, moving the mech's arm in a practice motion. But it works. If we can build 100 of these before the fleet arrives, we might have a chance. We have resources for 50, the engineer said. Maybe 60, if we strip every factory on the planet. Then we build 60, Bo-Ra said firmly. And we train 60 pilots who won't flinch when a Vrax warrior charges at them. While Earth prepared for war, diplomat Jae-hyun traveled through neutral space, visiting small civilizations that existed in the shadows between the great empires. His ship was small and unmarked, designed not to attract attention. His first stop was a mining colony run by the Talok species. They were small, gray-skinned beings who had been conquered by the Vrax 2 centuries ago, but were allowed to maintain limited self-government as long as they provided minerals to the empire. You want us to help you fight the Vrax? The Talok elder said, his 3 eyes wide with fear. They would destroy our entire world as punishment. They're going to destroy Earth, Jae-hyun replied calmly. After they finish with us, do you think they'll treat you any better? The Vrax see kindness as weakness. If humanity falls, there will be no one left who dares to resist them. The elder was quiet for a long time. Finally, he spoke. What kind of help are you asking for? Information, Jae-hyun said. You've worked for the Vrax for 200 years. You know their supply lines, their communication systems, their weaknesses. Share that knowledge with us. Over the next month, Jae-hyun visited 17 different species. Most were too afraid to help openly. But many shared what they knew about the warrior empires. He learned about Kuresh hive ships that relied on a central queen for coordination. He discovered that Velthor crystalline warriors were vulnerable to certain sound frequencies. He mapped out supply routes and staging areas. Each piece of information was sent back to Earth, where analysts added it to their battle plans. Back on Earth, the preparations continued at a frantic pace. Every able-bodied person was either building defenses, training for combat, or supporting those who were. Cities that had once competed in sports and business now competed to see who could produce the most weapons, train the most soldiers, build the strongest fortifications. Sujin finally had a breakthrough in her laboratory. She had figured out how to modify Earth's reactor technology using Vrak's principles. The new reactors wouldn't be as powerful as Vrak's originals, but they were 3 times better than what humanity had before. More importantly, they could be built quickly. Start production immediately, she ordered. Every ship in the fleet needs to be refitted with these new reactors. And we need to build more ships. As many as we can in the time we have left. Bora's mech unit was the first of a new squadron called the Steel Dragons. 59 other pilots trained alongside her, learning to fight in the massive machines. They practiced in simulated environments, fighting holographic Vrak's warriors until their reaction times were perfect. Remember, Bora told her fellow pilots during a training session, the Vraks are bigger and stronger than us. They have better armor and more experience. But we're faster, and we can think independently. Use that advantage. 3 months after Taesung's warning, deep space sensors detected the approaching fleet. It was even larger than intelligence had estimated. 3,200 ships, representing 3 of the most powerful warrior civilizations in the galaxy. The transmission came shortly after. Imperator Thraknor appeared on screens across Earth, his massive form imposing even through hologram. Humans of Earth, he said, his voice deep and commanding. You have twice defeated Vrak's forces. This required strength and cunning, and we acknowledge this. But your defiance cannot continue. The Vrak's Empire, the Kuresh Swarm, and the Velthor Collective have united for the first time in galactic history. Together, we represent over 1,000 star systems and millions of warriors. Thraknor paused, letting his words sink in. We offer you one chance at survival. Surrender now. Accept status as a subject. Species under Vrak's protection. Your people will be allowed to live, though you will serve the Empire. This is more mercy than we have shown to other species who resisted us. The Imperator's eyes narrowed. Refuse, and we will destroy your world completely. You have 1 Earth day to decide. Choose wisely. The transmission ended. Across the planet, people watched in silence. 1 day to decide between slavery and extinction. The choice seemed impossible. In the command center, Earth's leaders gathered. Some argued for surrender, saying that slavery was better than death. Others insisted on fighting, even if it meant the end of humanity. The argument grew heated. Finally, Admiral Taesung stood up. We've all seen the numbers. We all know what we're facing. 3,000 ships against our 140, advanced warriors against people who were exploring peacefully just a year ago. On paper, we can't win. He looked around the room at each person. But here's what I know about humanity. We've faced extinction before. Ice ages, plagues, wars, disasters. Every time, we were supposed to die out. Every time, we survived because we refused to give up. Taesung pulled up a hologram showing Earth from space. The Vraks have conquered 1,000 worlds. They think they understand war, but they've never fought a species that has spent its entire existence fighting itself. We know every dirty trick, every desperate tactic, every last resort strategy. We know how to win when we shouldn't. He turned back to the leaders. I say we fight, not because we're sure we can win, but because we're sure we can't live as slaves. And I believe that somewhere in the galaxy, other species are watching us. If we stand and fight, even if we lose, we show them that the warrior empires can be resisted. There was a long silence. Then, one by one, the leaders nodded. The response to Thraknor was short. Just one word, broadcast across every communication channel. No. On his flagship, Thraknor received the message. He had expected it. But part of him had hoped these humans would see reason. Now there was no choice. Battle Marshal Kryn, he said to the scarred warrior beside him. You will have your revenge. Prepare the fleet for total assault. We will not leave Earth until every human city is ash. Kryn bowed. It will be done, Imperator. The humans have courage. I will grant them that. But courage alone cannot defeat 3,000 warships. Indeed, Thraknor agreed. Begin the attack at dawn. Let us finish this quickly. But neither of them knew what humanity had prepared in the months since the last battle. They didn't know about Sujin's reactor improvements, or Bo-Ra's mech squadrons, or Jae-hyun's intelligence network. They didn't know about the thousands of automated defense satellites hidden throughout the solar system, or the trap that Taesung had been preparing for months. Most importantly, they didn't understand that humans had one ability that the warrior empires had forgotten over their millennia of dominance: the ability to adapt, to change tactics, to try new strategies, to think of solutions that had never been attempted before. As the combined fleet approached Earth's solar system, Admiral Taesung stood on the bridge of the Times Hansong Asterisk, watching their approach on the tactical display. Around him, his crew worked quietly, efficiently, each person knowing their role in the desperate plan. All ships report ready, Haewon said from her station. Defense platforms are armed and waiting. Mech units are deployed on Mars and the Moon. Ground forces are in position. Good, Taesung said. He opened a channel to the entire Earth defense fleet. This is Admiral Taesung. In a few hours, we will face the largest fleet ever assembled in this sector of space. They outnumber us, 30-1. They have better weapons, better shields, better everything. He paused, looking at the faces of his crew. Young faces, mostly. People who had been civilians a year ago and were now warriors, but they don't have what we have. They don't have the desperation of people fighting for their home. They don't have the creativity that comes from refusing to accept defeat. And they sure as hell don't have the stubbornness that makes humans keep fighting long after any sane species would surrender. Taesung smiled grimly. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to show these warrior empires what happens when they threaten Earth. We're going to make them regret every ship they sent here. And we're going to survive, because that's what humans do. He closed the channel and turned to Haewon. Sound battle stations. All ships, prepare for combat. Let's give them a fight they'll never forget. The first wave hit Earth's outer defenses at 0600 hours. 500 Vrak ships, advancing in perfect formation. They expected the same traps that had worked before, but Taesung had planned for that. This time, humanity didn't hide its defenses. Instead, the automated satellite network lit up like a constellation, thousands of weapons platforms revealing themselves all at once. The Vrak's fleet suddenly found itself surrounded by firepower. All platforms, fire at will. Taesung commanded. Space erupted with light. Missiles streaked from every direction. Laser batteries carved through void. The Vrak's formation held, their shields absorbing the initial barrage, but they were taking damage. More importantly, they were confused. They're not trying to hide, Battle Marshal Kryn observed from his command ship. They're announcing their positions. Why? His tactical officer studied the data. Sir, I think they want us to target the platforms. If we focus on destroying them, we'll waste time and ammunition. Kryn nodded slowly. They're trading equipment for time. Very well. Ignore the platforms. All ships, push through to the inner system. Target Mars first. The Vrak's fleet accelerated, accepting losses from the automated defenses as they drove deeper into human territory. Behind them came the Q-Resh swarm ships, organic vessels that looked like massive insects. The Velthor collective brought up the rear, their crystalline ships refracting starlight into rainbow patterns. On Mars, Captain Minho watched the approaching fleet through his command post's reinforced windows. Mars had been partially terraformed, with scattered colonies connected by underground tunnels. Now those colonies were fortresses, and 40,000 human soldiers waited in them. Remember your training, Minho said over the general channel. The Vraks will try to land troops. Don't let them establish a beachhead. Use the terrain against them. Mars is our home now, and we know it better than they do. The first Vrax landing ships hit the Martian surface near Olympus Mons. Ramps dropped, and hundreds of Vrax warriors poured out, their armor gleaming in the thin sunlight. They were magnificent and terrifying, each one a veteran of countless battles. Minho waited until they had advanced 100 meters from their ships. Then he gave the order. Now. The ground beneath the Vrax warriors exploded. Humanity had spent months placing explosives throughout the likely landing zones, shaped charges designed to direct their blast upward. Dozens of Vrax fell in the first moment. The survivors charged toward the human positions, roaring battle cries that echoed across the red plains. They expected to find frightened defenders. Instead, they ran into a carefully prepared killing field. Automated turrets opened fire from concealed positions. Mines erupted under their feet. Human soldiers in powered armor emerged from tunnels, firing weapons, and then disappearing back underground before the Vrax could respond. They're using guerrilla tactics, a Vrax officer reported to his commander. They won't stand and fight. They hit us and retreat. The Vrax commander growled in frustration. His warriors were trained for open battle, for glorious combat where strength decided victory. But the humans wouldn't give him that. They fought like cowards, striking from hiding and running away. Except they weren't cowards, they were smart. Commander Eugene led her squad through the tunnel network beneath the Martian surface. They had just collapsed a tunnel behind them, trapping a group of Vrax warriors who would now have to dig themselves out. Her soldiers were tired but determined. Next target is landing zone 3, she said, checking her tactical display. They're unloading heavy equipment. If we can destroy those cargo carriers, we'll slow their advance significantly. Her squad emerged from a tunnel exit 2 kilometers from the landing zone. The thin Martian atmosphere made long-range shooting difficult. But Eugene had trained for this. She set up her rifle on its tripod, calculated wind and distance, and put a high-explosive round directly into a cargo ship's fuel tank. The explosion was beautiful and terrible, a flower of fire blooming against the red sky. 2 other cargo ships were caught in the blast. The Vrax rushed to contain the damage, and in their confusion, they didn't notice Eugene's squad slipping back underground. The battle for Mars lasted 47 days. The Vrax controlled the surface during the day, but at night, human raids made their positions untenable. Supply lines were constantly attacked. Every forward position had to be heavily defended. The Vrax were winning in the sense that they held ground, but they were bleeding resources at an unsustainable rate. While Mars held, the main fleet battle raged in Earth's orbital space. Admiral Tae-sung fought a defensive war, refusing to commit his full strength to any single engagement. He would attack with a small force, inflict damage, and retreat before the enemy could bring their superior numbers to bear. Hae-won coordinated the fleet's movements with the precision of a concert conductor. Squadron 7. Break off and regroup behind the moon. Squadron 3. Advance and engage their left flank. Hold for 30 seconds, then retreat. It was exhausting, constant motion, never resting, never giving the enemy a chance to pin down the human fleet. The Vrax grew frustrated. The Kuresh swarm, which relied on overwhelming numbers, found their tactics ineffective against an enemy that wouldn't stand still long enough to be overwhelmed. Youngmi tried her hacking tricks again, but the Vrax had learned. Their networks were now isolated, each ship operating independently. She shifted tactics, instead focusing on disrupting communications between the Allied fleets. A fake order here, a scrambled message there. Small things that added up to confusion and mistrust between the Vrax, Kuresh, and Velthor forces. On the moon, Bo-Ra led the Steel Dragons in battle. The mech units were too valuable to risk in open space combat, so they waited on the lunar surface for the moment when they would be needed most. That moment came when a Kuresh hive ship crashed on the moon's surface, damaged by Earth's orbital defenses. It was huge, 10 kilometers long, and it began disgorging Kuresh warriors by the thousands. The insectoid soldiers swarmed across the gray dust, heading for the human mining colonies that had been converted into military bases. Steel Dragons, advance, Bo-Ra commanded. Her mech unit strode forward, its heavy feet leaving deep prints in the lunar regolith. Around her, 59 other mechs moved into formation. The Qresh saw them coming and didn't hesitate. The aliens had no fear, no doubt. They attacked in waves, their biological weapons spitting acid and their claws designed to tear through armor. But the mechs were ready. Bo-Ra's weapons cycled through different modes, burning, freezing, and crushing the alien swarm. Her neural interface let her react faster than any pilot using conventional controls. She felt the battle more than saw it. Her mind merged with the machine's sensors. "Focus on the Queen," she ordered, spotting the larger Qresh directing the swarm from the crashed ship. Without her, they'll lose coordination. The steel dragons pushed through the alien swarm, taking damage but never stopping. Bo-Ra reached the hive ship first. She fired her main cannon directly at the Queen chamber. The explosion sent a shockwave across the lunar surface, and the Qresh warriors suddenly lost their organized movements, becoming confused and erratic. "Mop them up," Bo-Ra said, "and get repair crews to my mech. I think I'm leaking coolant." Back on Earth, the war came home in ways people had never imagined. A Velthor strike group broke through the orbital defenses and launched bombardment on major cities. Seoul, New York, Beijing, London, all were struck by kinetic weapons that left massive craters. Field medic Na-Un worked in the ruins of what had been a hospital in Seoul. The building was half collapsed, but there were survivors to treat. She worked alongside a makeshift team of doctors and volunteers, treating burns, broken bones, and worse. A Vrax warrior stumbled into her field hospital. He was injured, separated from his unit, his armor cracked and leaking. Na-Un's security team raised their weapons, but she held up her hand. "Don't shoot," she said. "He needs medical attention." "He's the enemy," one of the security guards protested. "He's wounded," Na-Un replied firmly. "And I'm a medic. I don't care what species my patients are." She approached the Vrax warrior slowly, showing her empty hands. He was defensive, ready to fight despite his injuries. Na-Un began speaking in the Vrax language, words she had learned from captured broadcasts. "I am a healer. I want to help you. Will you let me?" The Vrax stared at her with his yellow eyes, confusion evident in his expression. In his experience, enemies killed each other. They didn't offer medical assistance. Slowly, uncertain, he lowered his weapon and allowed Na-Un to examine his wounds. As she worked, other human patients watched. Some were angry, seeing the enemy being treated alongside them. But others understood what Na-Un was demonstrating. That humanity was fighting to survive, yes, but not fighting to become monsters. Far from Earth, Dong-hyun sat in a small stealth ship, working on his most ambitious plan yet. He had been studying the communications between the three allied empires, and he had noticed something interesting. They didn't trust each other. The Vrax saw the Qresh as savage and uncontrolled. The Qresh found the Velthor too logical and cold. The Velthor considered both the Vrax and Qresh to be inefficient and primitive. They were allies only because they all wanted to defeat humanity. Dong-hyun began crafting false messages, subtle things that would inflame existing tensions. A Qresh fleet commander, complaining about Vrax incompetence. A Velthor calculation, proving that the Qresh were holding back their forces. A Vrax admiral, suggesting that the Velthor were planning to betray them after Earth's defeat. None of the messages were obvious fakes. They were carefully crafted to seem authentic, to play on existing prejudices and fears. Dong-hyun sent them into the enemy communications network and waited to see what would happen. On the 45th day of the battle, the Qresh swarm suddenly withdrew a significant portion of their fleet. Their queen mind had calculated that the losses they were taking were unsustainable, and more importantly, she had intercepted communications that suggested their allies viewed the Qresh as expendable. The withdrawal created a gap in the allied fleet formation. Taesung saw the opportunity immediately. "All ships, concentrate fire on that sector. Hit them while they're reorganizing." The human fleet struck hard and fast, destroying 27 enemy ships before the Vrax and Velthor could close the gap. But the damage was done, both physically and psychologically. The alliance was cracking. Imperator Thraknor stood on his command bridge, watching reports of another failed assault. Earth's moon was still in human hands. Mars refused to fall despite being bombed for over a month. The human fleet, though heavily damaged, was still fighting, and now the Qresh were withdrawing significant forces. How? He demanded. How are these primitives still resisting? We have superior numbers, superior technology, superior warriors. Battle Marshal Kryn, who had fought humans twice now, had an answer. Because they are not fighting for glory or conquest, Imperator. They are fighting for survival. And a species fighting for survival will use every trick, every tactic, every desperate strategy. They have no honor to constrain them, no traditions to limit them. They simply do whatever works. Thraknor's claws dug into his command chair. Then we must be equally ruthless. Prepare the planet-killer weapons. If we cannot conquer Earth, we will destroy it completely. The warning came from deep space observation posts scattered throughout the solar system. The Vraks were moving 3 massive vessels toward Earth, ships that dwarfed everything else in their fleet. Each one was designed for a single purpose: to destroy planets. Admiral Tae-sung read the report with a cold feeling in his stomach. His fleet was battered and low on ammunition. Mars was barely holding. The moon bases were running out of supplies, and now the enemy was preparing to end everything in one final strike. How long until those planet killers are in range? He asked Haewon. 6 hours, sir. Once they're in position, they'll need approximately 30 minutes to charge their weapons. Then, she didn't finish the sentence. They both knew what would happen then. So we have 6 hours to stop 3 ships that are each 10 times larger than anything in our fleet, Tae-sung said. And they'll be protected by what remains of the Vrak's armada. Yes, sir, Haewon confirmed quietly. Tae-sung looked at the tactical display, at the positions of his ships, at the enemy forces. The math didn't work. They couldn't win a direct assault. But maybe they didn't need to win. Maybe they just needed to survive long enough for something to change. On the Qresh Hive flagship, the Queen Mind was processing disturbing data. Her swarm had lost 40% of its forces in the battle for Earth. The Vraks and Velthor had lost less, because they had allowed the Qresh to take the most dangerous assignments. The Queen Mind's vast intelligence could see the pattern clearly. The Qresh were being used as expendable troops. More disturbing was the concept the Queen Mind had observed in human behavior. Individual sacrifice for the collective good was something the Qresh understood. But the humans did something the Queen Mind had never encountered. They sacrificed for individuals. A soldier would risk death to save a single wounded comrade. A pilot would crash their ship to protect civilians they had never met. This made no logical sense to the Queen Mind, yet it seemed to make the humans stronger, not weaker. How could this be? The Queen Mind reached a decision. The alliance with the Vraks and Velthor was not beneficial to the swarm. Better to withdraw. To preserve her forces. To return to Kresh space and rebuild. Let the Vraks and Velthor finish this war themselves if they could. The order went out through the Hive network, and within minutes, the entire Qresh swarm began jumping away from Earth's system. Hundreds of ships vanished, leaving a massive hole in the Allied fleet. Battle Marshal Kryn watched the Kresh departure with anger but not surprise. The alliance had been fractured from the beginning. Now only the Vraks and Velthor remained, and Kryn could see doubt in the crystalline being's communications. The Velthor collective operated on pure logic and calculation. Their computational matrix was processing a simple fact. The original mission prediction suggested Earth would fall within 10 days. It had now been 62 days, and humans still controlled their homeworld. The resource expenditure had exceeded acceptable parameters by 400%. The Velthor calculated probable outcomes and did not like the results. Even if Earth fell, the cost would destabilize their entire economy for a decade. The logical choice was clear. We withdraw, the Velthor fleet commander announced in their musical, crystalline voice. The cost-benefit analysis no longer supports continued engagement. You cannot leave, Kryn protested. We have them cornered. The planet killers will end this. Then you do not require our assistance, the Velthor replied. We wish you success in your endeavor. And just like that, the Velthor collective's ships began jumping away. their crystalline hulls refracting light one final time before vanishing into deep space. Imperator Thraknor received the news aboard his command flagship. His allies had abandoned him. The Kuresh and Velthor had decided that defeating humanity was not worth the cost. His empire now stood alone against Earth. "We continue," Thraknor declared. "The Vraks do not retreat. We will destroy Earth, and the galaxy will remember that the Vraks Empire does not accept defeat." But as he spoke, Thraknor felt something he had never experienced in 3,000 years of Vraks dominance. Doubt. Half his fleet was gone. Either destroyed by humans, or withdrawn by disloyal allies. The planet killers would work, yes, but at what cost to Vrak's pride? His species had built an empire on the belief that they were the greatest warriors in the galaxy. But a small human crew on a mining ship had defeated his boarding party. A human fleet 1/30th the size of his had forced him to retreat. And now Earth, alone and heavily damaged, still refused to surrender. What did that say about the Vraks? Admiral Tae Sung watched the enemy fleet reorganize after the Kuresh and Velthor withdrawal. His tactical officer Hae Won was running calculations. "Sir, with the Allies gone, the Vraks numbers are much lower. We might actually have a chance to stop those planet killers." "Might isn't good enough," Tae Sung said. "We need a certainty. Hae Won, send a message to all remaining ships. Tell them we're committing everything to one final push. Every weapon, every ship, every pilot. We stop those planet killers, or we die trying." The response came quickly from every vessel in the battered human fleet. They were ready. They had always been ready. Bo-Ra launched from the moon in her rebuilt mech, leading the steel dragons one more time. Her unit was down to 47 mechs, the others destroyed in the lunar battle, but 47 would be enough. "Target the planet killer ships," she ordered. "We board them and destroy them from inside. The Vraks won't expect a boarding action from mechs." Youngmi worked her cyber warfare magic one last time, creating phantom signals that made the Vraks think human reinforcements were arriving from outside the solar system. It wouldn't fool them for long, but it might buy crucial minutes. Sujin, exhausted from months of constant work, sent one final design to the fleet fabrication ships. A missile with a warhead built from modified Vraks reactor cores. It would be unstable, dangerous, and probably blow up the ship that launched it. But if it hit a planet killer, the explosion would be catastrophic. On Mars, Captain Minho received orders to launch a full-surface assault on Vrak's positions. It was a suicide mission, designed to draw enemy attention away from the main fleet. He gathered his remaining forces and explained the plan. "We probably won't survive this," he told them honestly. "But if we can keep the Vrak's ground forces busy, the fleet has a better chance of stopping the planet killers. Earth survives, even if we don't." Not a single soldier asked to be excused. They had fought for 60 days on the Red Planet. They would fight for one more day. The final battle began with Earth's fleet charging directly at the 3 planet killer ships. Every human vessel opened fire simultaneously. A wall of missiles and energy beams that lit up space. The Vrak's fleet moved to intercept. But they were spread thin now, weakened by losses and the departure of their allies. Bo-Ra's steel dragons came in from an unexpected angle, using the moon as cover. They latched onto the hull of the first planet killer with magnetic clamps and began cutting through the armor with plasma torches. 5 minutes to breach the hull, Bo-Ra reported. Around her, enemy fighters were trying to dislodge the mechs, but the steel dragons held firm. Youngmi's phantom signals worked better than expected. The Vrak's fleet commander diverted ships to intercept the fake reinforcements, weakening his defensive formation. By the time he realized it was a trick, the human fleet was already among the planet killer ships. The Times Hansong Times took heavy fire as it approached the second planet killer. Tae Sung felt his ship shudder with each impact, alarms blaring across the bridge. "Launch Sujin's special missile," he ordered. "Sir, if it explodes prematurely, we'll be vaporized," Hae Won warned. "Then it better not explode prematurely," Tae Sung replied. The missile launched, its unstable reactor core glowing with barely contained energy. It streaked toward the planet killer, and Vrak's point defenses began firing at it. 1 shot, 2 shots, 3. The missile took hits but kept going, its modified Vrak shielding absorbing the damage. Then it struck home, penetrating deep into the planet killer's hull, before detonating. The explosion was like a new sun being born, a sphere of plasma that consumed the entire ship and several nearby Vrak's vessels. Bora's team breached the first planet killer's hull and fought their way inside. The corridors were huge, designed for the massive Vraks, but that gave the mechs room to maneuver. They reached the main reactor and planted charges, then evacuated as fast as they could. The explosion was smaller than Sujin's missile but just as effective. The first planet killer broke apart, its structural integrity compromised. That left 1 planet killer, and it was already in position, its weapons beginning to charge. Tae-sung could see the energy readings building. In 15 minutes, Earth would be destroyed. All ships, ramming speed, he ordered. Target that last planet killer. We stop it now, or we don't stop it at all. What remained of the human fleet accelerated toward the final planet killer. Ships that could barely move, held together by emergency repairs and determination. Every captain knew this was the end, but they had known this was the end since the day the Vraks arrived. Battle Marshal Kryn watched the human fleet's final charge and felt something he had not experienced in 50 years of warfare. Respect. These humans were going to die, and they knew it, and they charged anyway. On his flagship, Imperator Thraknor watched the same thing. He saw human ships, burning and broken, still advancing. He saw mechs fighting impossible odds. He saw a species that simply would not stop, would not surrender, would not accept defeat. And he understood that if the Vraks destroyed Earth now, they would win nothing. Humanity would become a legend, a story told across the galaxy about the species that fought 3 empires and died with honor. Other species would be inspired. Resistance would grow. The Vraks would face rebellion on 100 worlds. But if he stopped now, if he offered peace instead of destruction, the Vraks could claim something more valuable than a dead world. They could claim wisdom. They could show the galaxy that even the greatest warriors knew when to stop fighting. Thraknor made his decision. All ships, cease fire. Shut down the planet killer's weapons. Kryn turned to stare at his Imperator. My lord? Send a communication to the human fleet, Thraknor ordered. Tell them we wish to discuss terms. On the Times Hansong asterisk, Hae-1 looked up from her console in shock. Sir, the Vraks are hailing us. They want to negotiate. Tae-sung sat down heavily in his command chair. They had been seconds away from a final suicide charge. Put them through. Imperator Thraknor's face appeared on the screen. He looked tired, ancient, but his eyes were clear. Admiral Tae-sung, the Imperator said, in accented but clear English, you have proven that humans cannot be conquered. Not by the Vraks, not by any empire. We could destroy your world, but we cannot destroy your spirit. And that spirit would haunt us across the galaxy. Thraknor paused. I propose a treaty. The Vraks Empire will recognize Earth as a sovereign system. We will not attack you again. In return, we ask only that you share your knowledge of adaptation and innovation. Perhaps the Vraks have something to learn from you. Tae-sung was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke. Send Battle Marshal Kryn to a neutral station. We'll send our diplomat Jae-hyun to meet him. They can work out the details. 3 weeks later, Ambassador Dae-hyun stood before the Galactic Assembly, a council of species that existed in the shadow of the great empires. He had been promoted from ship captain to diplomat because he had been the first human to defeat the Vraks. For 3,000 years, Dae-hyun said, the galaxy has been ruled by the strong. The warrior empires conquered who they wished, and the rest of us lived in fear. But that era is ending. Not because humanity is stronger than the Vraks. We're not. But because we showed that strength alone is not enough. He gestured to Battle Marshal Kryn, who stood nearby, the first Vraks to ever attend a Galactic Assembly meeting as an equal, rather than a conqueror. The Vraks Empire has signed the Treaty of Sol. They have agreed to peace. And they did so Not out of weakness, but out of wisdom. Because sometimes the greatest strength is knowing when to stop fighting. Daehyun looked out at the assembled species. Humanity asks nothing except friendship and cooperation. We know we cannot stand alone, but together, all of us, small species, all of us who have lived in fear, together we can build something new. A galaxy where strength and compassion can exist side by side. The assembly erupted in discussion. Some species were skeptical. Others were hopeful. But all of them were talking, considering possibilities that had seemed impossible just months ago. On Earth, reconstruction had begun. Cities were being rebuilt, casualties were being mourned. The scars of war would take decades to heal. But they would heal because humanity had survived. Naun worked in a hospital, treating both human and alien wounded. The Vrax warrior she had saved was now recovering in a ward alongside human soldiers. At first, there had been tension. But slowly, carefully, they were learning to coexist. Bo-Ra trained new mech pilots, teaching them the lessons learned in the war. We won, she told them, but not because we were stronger. We won because we were smarter, faster, and more willing to try new things. Never forget that. Sujin returned to her research, but now she had access to technology from multiple species. The Vrax were sharing their power generation designs. The Talok, no longer afraid, were sending mineral samples. The galaxy was opening up to humanity. Admiral Tae-sung retired from active duty, his body exhausted from the long war, but he spent his days writing, documenting everything that had happened, so future generations would understand the price of survival. Young Mi became the head of Earth's new cyber defense department, training others in the techniques she had pioneered. She kept a close eye on galactic communications, watching for signs of new threats, but also for opportunities to help other species resist oppression. And in the Vrax throne room, Imperator Thraknor looked out at his empire and saw it with new eyes. His species had ruled through fear for so long that they had forgotten how to grow, how to change, how to improve. The humans had taught them a valuable lesson. Adaptation was more powerful than tradition. The Vrax Empire began to change. Slowly, carefully, but genuinely. They started treating conquered species as allies rather than subjects. They invited innovation instead of suppressing it. They learned that there were many kinds of strength, and the ability to change was perhaps the most important. The galaxy watched these changes with amazement. The most feared warriors in known space had indeed met their match, not in strength, but in spirit. Humanity had shown that even the mightiest empire could learn, could grow, could become something better than what it had been. And in the shadows of space, in the small civilizations that had existed between the empires, hope began to grow. If the Vrax could change, if humans could stand against impossible odds and survive, then perhaps the future could be different from the past. Perhaps peace was possible after all. The war was over. The real work of building a new galaxy was just beginning. And humanity, battered but unbroken, stood ready to help shape that future alongside their former enemies. Now they're unlikely partners in creating something the galaxy had never known, a civilization built on cooperation rather than conquest.